Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 o'clock, and I'd like to call the second meeting of the Planning Environment Committee to order. Just for information for the public, please check the city website for additional meeting detail information. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenapehoik, and the Attawadron. We honor and respect the history and languages and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we're grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact pec@london.ca, that's PEC@london.ca, or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. At this point in time, I'd like to call for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we will move to the consent items. We have 8 consent items, and I will be pulling 2.5 as per the staff referral memo that we got in our addeds. Are there any other items that committee would like pulled? Councillor Frank.
Could we pull 2.1 as well, please?
Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I don't need to really pull them, but 2.1, which is already being pulled, maybe 2.2 as well then.
All right. So just for the committee's information, we will be bringing those that are pulled 2.1, 2.2.
Hi, guys. Hi. Fine, how are you?
Just request that all people that are streaming in, please mute. Thank you very much. We were pulling 2.1, 2.2, and 2.5. Are there any other, Councillor Frank?
If I just have questions, can we also pull 2.3, or can I do?
Yeah, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions and make comments, but they'll be voted in their entirety. Any other items that council or the committee would like to pull? Okay, so we will be putting those to the end of our meeting at deferred matters and additional business as per the new procedure we're adopting. So we have now 2.3, 2.4, 2.6, 2.7, and 2.8. So I will go to the committee to make a motion to put that on the floor. Councillor Hopkins, second by Councillor Lewis. And now I'll open the floor for comments or questions. Councillor Frank?
Yes, sorry. Where is it? Yes, for 2.3, I had some questions about the Audit and Accountability Fund report that we got from staff. So can I just rapid fire?
Sorry, yeah, please go ahead and through the chair and I'll address it to staff.
All right, so through the chair, on page 77 of the original agenda, I noticed that through the process review, that the applicant of the development files, the project site plan and files, usually has the file for about 60% of the time for admin applications, and then 64% of the time for standard applications. So staff having it for 40% and 36%. So I'm just wondering through this process analysis, if staff have been looking at timeline requirements for the applicant to resubmit in time so that it doesn't trigger the Bill 109 effect of having to refund. So I'm just wondering what has kind of been looked at to make sure that the turnaround time getting it back from the applicant won't impact the refundability.
I'll go to staff on that.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The Bill 109 timelines that are associated with site plan, maybe I'll take a step back and briefly talk about the process for site plan. Site plan starts with an initial application with the submission of all the plans and drawings and reports. Under the new rules of Bill 109, we have 30 or 60 days to provide a response to the applicant, provide effectively conditional approval. we're maintaining our previous timeline of 30 days. Administrative applications, which are more small scale in nature, we typically look for about 15 to 20 days. As long as we meet that 60-day timeline, the clock or the Bill 109 obligations have been achieved. The way site plan works is that you go kind of back and forth to satisfy all the requirements of staff's comments of the initial review of the plans. So you might see in the audit and accountability report discusses about resubmissions. And on average, it's about 3 to 4 resubmissions for a standard application, about 2 to 3 for an administrative application. There is no timeline associated with that under the Act. At that point, there's opportunities for appeals if the applicants aren't too keen on how long the process is taking, but generally work together with staff to meet statutory or meet obligations and timelines of their expectations. So there is no timeline associated once you meet that initial conditional approval. We strive to meet our timelines in our file manager document, which have, again, noted timelines on how long it's going to take us to review our site plan materials. But we typically can't control how long that gap takes. That, we call it the chess clock, has been very eye-opening and informative for us as well, and hope to help reduce that by working with our colleagues in the development sector on how we could reduce that, because it creates more file load for us and more time and uncertainty for us as well. So there's mutual benefits to that.
Counselor?
Thank you, that's very helpful. And my understanding is this process review is just for site plan. So then I'm just also wondering for rezoning, if the kind of similar time clock thing is being looked at for that process as well.
Staff?
Thank you. Through the chair. So the time clock for the rezoning is a little different. We don't have the same time clock. So any delays in the rezoning process would impact the 90 days, and we would be looking at refunds. What we're trying or looking at doing is moving a lot of that issue resolution prior to an application through additional consultation. We're still pretty early on in determining what that's going to look like, but that's the intent, is to do a little more consultation and address those issues earlier on, so there's not as much back and forth through the application.
Counselor Frank?
Thank you. And through the chair, I have a different question. So on page 84 of the original agenda, it was discussed that there are going to be some changes to community consultation. And I was just wondering if you could maybe walk me through a bit about what that looks like for community consultation through the changes of the process.
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, I'm not 100% sure what exactly the community consultation was about. In terms of the zoning bylaw and official plan amendments, again, what we're looking at doing is ensuring that's held prior to an application coming in. Again, community consultation will slow down the process within that 90 days, so it will be a requirement of complete application and part of that original submission. So that's kind of the idea for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments.
Counselor?
Thank you. And my last question about the process assessment. I was wondering, I noticed that there was no mention in the report about staffing requirements. So I just was wondering if that was something that was being examined at a later date. Like if, I'm just wondering if, for example, staff are at capacity or if they're over capacity, if that's causing some of the delays. So I'm just wondering if there's any comments on if that's going to be looked at eventually, or it was included, maybe just doesn't show up on the report.
I'll go to staff.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Through the chair. In terms of staffing, in terms of my area, we are getting up to complement. Obviously, experience is a major thing. We have a lot of new staff, which does make things a little more difficult with given the complexity of all the applications coming in. We do have a very high volume right now of OPAs, ZBAs, variances and consent, so we are stretched fairly thin, but I think we're doing our best. And you know, when Bill 109 comes in, we'll take a look at if we need more resources, which likely will be.
Counselor? Any other comments or questions? Counselor Hawkins?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. I do want to thank you for the report, and I know there's a lot of work that has gone into this to streamline our process. And it's great to know that the provincial government has given us a few more months here to make all this happen too, which is really important, that we can get it right without the pressures. I do want to just make a quick comment around improving communications. through the process. I think that's really important. The more we communicate, understand one another, and get these applications moving forward is really important. And I'm glad to read that it's ideal to have one-on-one meetings with the applicant as well. I understand that you know, sometimes applications, if you just see the paper, it's harder for it to get through the process. When you meet one-on-one, there's more of a personal relationship or a formal relationship that can identify and communicate in an easier way. Hopefully that will help the process along. I do have a question around, and I just want to say that's a really important part, I think, to bringing forward these applications faster. It is ideally to have those one-on-one, as difficult as it can be sometimes. I do think the building developers appreciate the contact that they do have with staff. I do have a quick question around the turnaround performance of these applications, and I'm just going to refer to the comments around before Bill 23, 69% of fees would be returned to applicants. So that's quite a bit of money, and I know we're coming up with a new process to make sure that it's going to be lower. Will we be given, or how will committee and council be reported to with these costs that may be borne by residents?
Go to staff on that.
Through the chair, I don't think it's been decided in terms of how we're going to report out on those timelines. You'll likely be made aware at the time you see an application if it is beyond the 90 days. So you would be aware, or if you were looking to refer something back, we'd let you know that it was going to extend past the 90 days. It's something we can do if you want it mid-year, end of the year, kind of an update on how many refunds we had to do throughout the year is something we can probably easily do, but we haven't strategized how we'll deliver that to you yet.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may just make that comment, I think it would be helpful to committee to sort of see where we're at once we get things going. It's really hard to keep track of all these applications. I understand that we'll be given notice in our recommendations and reports that if we do not make the decision, it will be, we may be in a bit of a predicament, but I think reporting down the road will be helpful. So thank you for allowing us to ask these questions. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just want to do a very quick follow-up question for our staff, picking up on something that Councillor Frank raised, which is the public consultation piece. In terms of it being in a pre-application period and being part of a completed application, you know, we often, through our PPMs here, are sending direction to staff that site plan approval authority be requested to consider. That's not a mandate that all of these things have to be done, but it's a to consider. So with the public consultation now being part of a pre-application process and being submitted with as part of a completed application, what does that look like in terms of timelines for those items that site plan authority may be requested to consider, but are not required to meet all of in order to advance an application forward? Because I do hear some concerns that all we're doing is front-end loading a time for before the clock starts ticking, rather than the clock starts ticking when all of those things may not necessarily have been resolved, but were in fact part of the application submission.
Staff?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think that there may be some confusion. Site plan is delegated authority to staff. I would suggest of the 120 or so that we get a year, there may be a small percentage, maybe 5 to 10, that come in through public site plan. That process will not change. It'll still come to this committee, much like there's an agenda item on later this evening. There won't be pre-consultation required as part of the submission comments for the application. I think maybe the previous discussion was more with respect to any sort of voluntary community meeting through the rezoning process that would happen prior to submitting an official plan or zoning bylaw amendment application.
Councillor? Any other questions or comments? If I may, if the committee allow, just a quick follow-up on Councillor Frank's comments regarding staffing. I noticed in the October report that we're starting to see a slowdown in applications coming forward and et cetera. Is that, this is from October, any anecdotal evidence that that trend is continuing? Are we coming off of peak times, and is staffing, is that lessening the load on existing staff or planned staff additions? And what effect is that having on current turnaround time and applications?
Through the chair, we don't have actually any information that I have available that says it's slowing down or anything. I can say, you know, before the holidays, we did get quite a number of applications in. It doesn't feel like it's slowing down. And I know generally the new year things pick up. So, you know, it comes in waves. Usually the summers are a little slower in terms of applications, but it's definitely picking up from what I've seen coming in my inbox.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other questions or comments, and we have the consent items on the floor moved and seconded, so I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We'll move on to the scheduled items. We have 7 PPMs, or public participation meetings, and one delegation from Mr. Levin. The first scheduled item, 3.1, this is on 88 Chesterfield Avenue. We have the staff report on that. What?
Sorry.
Excuse me? Sorry. So I will look to the committee now to open the PPM. I have Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Lewis. And we'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. So we have the staff report and their recommendation. I'll open the floor right now to any technical questions that the committee might have of staff. Seeing none, then I will ask if the applicant wants to have a presentation. I see a gentleman up there. Please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Matt Campbell, a partner with Zelenka Priamo. I don't have a presentation planned, but I would like to say it is nice to be back in front of committee for the first time in person in almost 3 years. It's nice to see some familiar faces here. We've read the staff report, certainly agreeable with the recommendation. Happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are happy to be back in person as well. I will go to members of the public. We don't have anybody on a list, but if there are anybody here or that we have on the phone that would like to speak to this, this is the time. I don't see anyone here in the gallery. I'll go to the clerk. Is there anyone?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's no one on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Hillier, seconder. Councillor Hopkins, I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So I will go to committee now. We have a recommendation from staff. I'll open the floor for questions or motions, et cetera. Councillor Lewis.
I'll move the staff recommendation to approve.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hillier. So we have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded. I'll go to committee members for any other comments or questions. Seeing none, I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We're moving on to 3.2, which is 634 Commissioners Road West. I will ask for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Hopkins, second. Councillor Frank, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So we have the staff report and the added fact sheet as well that has been part of our added agenda. Are there any technical questions for staff from the committee? Councillor Frank.
I think it's technical, but through the chair, I guess one of my questions again is the Parkland cash in lieu and the impacts of Bill 23 on that. And I'm just wondering if staff know, since it's asking for cash in lieu and Bill 23 is going to take that ability away, like, do we know when that's triggered, I guess, if that's a technical question?
Mr. Peace.
Thank you. Through the chair, Parkland is still a requirement through the building permit process, so it'd be checked off as part of the building permit review process of that stage. So it would not necessarily be picked up through the site plan anyways. In some cases, it would be picked up at the permit stage.
Councillor. Any other technical questions? Okay, I will go to the applicant. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Pribble, who is, has joined us.
I just have a question through the chair to the staff. We have within a couple of blocks or a couple of 100 meters for applications in this area. Are there any plans in terms of the commissioners widening the road just west of Wonderland?
Staff.
Through the chair, there are plans as a result of one of the applications down the road. We looked into it in 2033 is when it will be widened to 4 lanes. Commissioner's Road there.
Councillor.
Just a follow-up. Wouldn't it be better kind of to start negotiating, because these 4 developers, 3 for sure, potentially 4, if they're going to be building on, wouldn't this be the better time to negotiate with them in terms of?
Councillor, I'm just going to restrict you to technical questions right now, as opposed to, I think that's more of a, we can get into that in the debate format, if you don't mind. Thank you. If there's no other technical questions, I'll look to the applicant if they would like to present. The applicant here.
Good afternoon, Chair Lehman, members of the committee. It's Mike Davis here. I'm a partner with Civic Planning and Design in London. I'm here today representing Royal Premier Homes, who are the owner and developer of this project at 634 Commissioners Road West. I'll be very brief with my comments, but I want to say that we are fully in agreement with the staff report on your agenda and the bylaw that's being recommended. Do want to acknowledge the work of your planning staff in helping us navigate this application forward and doing so as quickly as possible. It's been great to work with them through the formal application process, but for our team and members of the neighborhood, this is a discussion and a process that kicked off even before then. Starting back in April, we invested a significant amount of time to talk to residents. We carried out a multi-phased engagement strategy for this project. It was an evolving conversation that ultimately had a lot of influence on the design that we ended up with here. Through that process, we know that we had 223 unique views of our project webpage. So we had 170 households in our circulation radius. We know actually we were able to reach a very high proportion of them. In terms of the project itself, we've worked really hard to ensure that it's hitting all of the key principles of the London Plan. Just for example, you'll see we're retaining and have allowed for the designation of the full volume of this original 1870 Georgian style dwelling, and we've incorporated that into the development plan. These new townhouses, these will be street oriented. So they're going to have front doors and stoops oriented towards Commissioners Road. Driveways and garages will be tucked in behind from the rear. So that'll help us to maintain, a pedestrian oriented type of streetscape, and also retain a number of mature trees that exist in that front yard area. Also, we baked into the zoning bylaw a special regulation that will preserve a healthy tree retention zone in the rear yard, or a green buffer. And also through this process, we have committed to keeping the building height at a maximum of 3 stories. So with those features, we think this is a really sensitive approach to infilling the site. Something that's going to provide much needed, missing middle style housing in a way we think complements and enhances the neighborhood. So with those comments, I'll just conclude. I do appreciate your time and consideration today immensely, and will be available to answer any questions about the project that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'll now go to the public for any comments on this item. I see a lady up in the top right. Please state your name, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Yes, hi, my name is Mary Melanson. I'm a resident of 665 Commissioners Road West, where you're right across the street. And I have been chatting, I've talked with Olga, and I've talked with my counselor, Paul. And the concern that I have, and several of our other unit dwellers across the street, is that Civic's done such a wonderful job. It's such an elegant, beautiful infill that we actually want to close any window that it could change, because when we get our notices, we see the asterisks, plan may change, and then I noticed that the density that's being asked to be changed is much higher than the units that are actually being shown in the proposal. And coming from another street in another city, we've had this challenge where once the density is approved, then the plan design changes, but we don't get the normal notice by writing, and then all of a sudden, if we're not diligent, it goes to the maximum that the density would allow, which I believe in this case is 25 or 26 single dwelling units as opposed to 11. So our request is to shut that door by putting a provision in the approval that it doesn't go any higher than 11 units. There is a traffic access and egress problem coming out of our unit, coming off of Notting Hill with no light. And it's very, very busy street already. And with all the e-commerce, extra traffic that goes in and out of units, that's about as maximum as that footprint can allow as far as we're concerned. So either that provision that Olga said can be put in if there's enough concern that it doesn't go any higher than the original design in the number of units, or at least giving us written and formal notice of any change that increases the number of dwellings that they're proposing with the design change. And I also found out from Olga that there's no traffic study that's part of their mandate, but I actually believe there should be a traffic study because of all the units that are being proposed in between Wonderland and Notting Hill. I think there's 4. We're only 1, this 11 units that's closest to us. So I do believe, and we do request that a traffic study be done as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? The gentleman up on the left, please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Wayne Smith. I own the small commercial building at the corner of Notting Hill and Commissioners Road, which is adjacent to this proposed development. My company has been operating out of this building since we purchased it in 2005. And I just want to say that during this public consultation done by the developer, I was never informed. I never got a call, nothing, no letter or anything about what they were proposing or what they were planning. So I just want to state that I was never involved in that process, even though I directly am adjacent to this property. Regarding my office building, of course, I spend many hours there. My staff and I will object to the loss of daylight which comes in through our windows on our east side. The setbacks and the construction height proposed in this plan will cast this side of my building in perpetual shadow. I note that none of the applicant's sketches show their building from my property's point of view. I also note that the plan has been revised to a height of 3 floors due to the visual aesthetics or conflicts with the heritage home. My building was built in a style which blends in with the single-family homes in the area and is frequently mistaken for a house by visitors and delivery people. It is less than 2 stories in height on its eastern side and was built with a setback of almost 4 meters. The heritage home is actually taller than my building, so even a 3-story structure immediately adjacent to my building is not desirable. I note that the development proposed for 584 Commissioners Road was rezoned as R5 721, which appears to stipulate a minimum setback of 3.5 meters with a 6-meter setback for a 2-story stacked town block in the rear. I feel it is fair to ask that the smaller of the 2 buildings being proposed here, the one immediately adjacent to my property, be limited to 2 stories in height if the setback is not increased, as was done for 584 Commissioners Road. Doing so might allow for the retention of a large mature oak tree that is close to the property line on the applicant's side. A cedar hedge and a mature maple tree on the property line will almost certainly be impacted by the proximity of this construction. I commend the attention given to the preservation of the existing house, which I understand was built in and around 1850. I knew the former owners and heard their stories of the house and the surrounding area, and especially of the large locust tree that is adjacent to the house. Carolyn Glass was especially fond of that tree, and it is likely well over 100 years old. And I ask that some consideration be made to keep the tree if at all possible. It would be sad if not even a single tree could be saved on this parkland setting of a property. I happen to live just on the other side of Wonderland Road, backing onto Commissioners, and when that road was widened a few years ago, many trees were cut down and never replaced. There apparently is no room for new trees. What we will notice the most when these developments and road widenings come to this area of Commissioners Road will be how utterly barren the landscape will be without these trees.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other comments or questions from the public? Is there anybody online? Before I look to the committee to close the PPM, there were a couple of questions that were raised by folks speaking, and I'd like to just go to staff on those. Can you tell us, once, let's assume an application is approved, can a design change, a significant design change happen, or density, once an application receives the zoning approval?
Through the chair, as a result of the public circulation of this application, staff did limit the density on the property to 25 units per hectare. So 11 units is the most they can get through that process. And also, as mentioned, the height's been restricted to 3 stories as opposed to the 4 that was initially applied for. So the reality is the built form is going to look very similar no matter how it comes in. There's limited options given the spacing of the property, but no more than 11 units can be developed on the property.
Thank you. And has there been a traffic study done for this application?
Through the chair, as noted, given the modest intensity of this development, no traffic impact study is required for that scale of development on the property.
Okay, thank you. And the final question, what's the delivery area around the property for notice of the application?
Through the chair, so the delivered area is 120 meters. The stat or the city notice did make it to the neighboring property. I can't comment on the notice sent out by the applicant as part of their process.
Okay, thank you. I will look for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Hillier, second. Councillor Lewis, and I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. So we'll go to the committee now for questions, comments, motions, etc. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the public for coming out. I also want to thank you for asking my number one question that the public had, which is around what is this development going to look like? And as we approve here this recommendation tonight, I was really glad to hear that it was going to be 11 units and the height being a 3-story, not 4-story, and not more than going up from 25 units per hectare. I think that's really important. And I want to thank the applicant too, because it didn't start from there, and working with the community is really important to come up with what's best for the whole community. And I will be moving this motion. I am supportive of it going forward, so I don't have a problem. I would like to add, though, I know a great deal has been done, this development around the heritage home, and obviously the importance of keeping that height down around the heritage home. But is it possible, I see in the recommendation that B5, retain as many mature trees as possible, especially along Commissioners Road West and along the east and south property lines between the proposed development and the adjacent single detached dwellings is noted in the recommendation. I would like to see if the committee would be amendable, a friendly amendment to adding that the locust tree be taken into consideration to be retained. With that, I am supportive of this development. There's a lot of development going on. Councillor Preble spoke to you know, the business of this area and what's to come. There is a lot of changes going on, but I know in my past experiences when it comes to transportation studies that there's a lot of leeway for movement. This intensity is going to happen on Commissioners Road. It is an arterial road. It is hopefully one day creating more transit space usability when we do these infills. I do like the access coming onto Commissioners Road. I think that will help the community when it comes to movement within the neighborhood, that it be kept outside of the community as people move around. So I am in favor. Again, I'll be supporting this and asking for a friendly amendment to be to add the locust tree to looking at preserving it as it goes through the process. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor with an amendment regarding a tree. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Frank and Councillor Lewis would like to speak to that.
I just wonder if staff have any comments in terms of adding another tree to consideration on the site plan, given the work that's been done already. Whether this has already been looked at or not, I honestly don't want to ask staff to do the same job twice.
I'll go to staff on that.
Thank you, through the chair. So a tree preservation plan was submitted as part of this application. My understanding from where the locust tree is, it will be removed as part of this application. And that was deemed appropriate through our review of the tree preservation plan. So again, to the point, we might be duplicating efforts, but it is something we can look at again if desired by the committee.
Councillor?
Well, I'll just say that's fine by me in terms of knowing that staff have done it already. I'm not supportive of the amendment. I am supportive of the staff recommendation.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah. Thank you, and I appreciate the response from staff. I know it's been looked at, and I'm hearing that this development won't go forward with then if we keep the locust tree. Is that correct?
Go to staff.
Through the chair, it would likely result in the loss of a unit on the west side of the development.
Councillor?
Yeah, I'm kind of perplexed a little bit because I think the developer has done his job in terms of keeping this development and the units lower and not going up high. I am very familiar with this lot as I go by it quite often, and there are a number of mature trees, and I think there has to be some regard. I know it's in the recommendation to retain as many mature trees. I would maybe make a friendly amendment to that, to review it one more time to see if it is possible. I'll just say that.
Okay, so we have a motion, and your amendment to your amendment would be to just review it?
I'm satisfied with retaining as many mature trees as possible, but I do think that certain trees should be retained and to review the tree. And if it is possible, I don't want to create a problem with this development because I am satisfied the intensity and the height. I am supportive of that, but I do think reviewing and looking at trees when development occurs, as they proceed, is important. It is an asset to the community as I see it, and I'll stay with my friendly amendment to review it again.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor with that amendment. I'll let people speak to that. But my understanding would be if the committee is not, if you're personally not in favor of that amendment, then you would vote against this, and then a new motion would be put on the floor with the staff recommendation. Councillor Frank.
Just a question through to staff. I just wanted to clarify with this then, if we do pass that amendment, would it require coming back to PEC, or would it just go through staff and the developer?
Go to staff.
Through the chair, this item would not have to come back to planning committee. It would just go through to site plan and the developer.
So am I understanding this correctly? Essentially, it would be to staff to review it as directed by the committee. We've reviewed it. We're going to stick with the original plan, and we'll proceed and that motion that we're going to pass, if we pass it, would be sufficient.
Through the chair, that's correct. It would all be dealt with at the site plan approval process, the review.
Okay. Any questions regarding that from committee members or Councillor Pribble as well? Okay. Any comments? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to reiterate, and I'm going to follow up on the comment that staff provided. I'm not going to support it as amended. We have a tree protection plan that has been submitted. Staff have reviewed that. The work has been done. And we've heard from staff that consideration would likely require the removal of one unit. And I think it's really important for committee members to consider that, you know, and you think not just about this development, but any development, but we saw it tonight. We've heard the work that the developer has put in to make this fit appropriately on the site. When we start taking away units, we start changing the financing for the builder, and to Councillor Hopkins' question about would this development not go forward, the consequences of changing the financing of how this is going to happen could in fact result in a development not going forward. And while I appreciate the intent to ensure we are preserving as many trees as possible, I think when a tree protection plan is submitted and the staff have reviewed it and they're satisfied with the recommendation that they brought forward, that we should really not be moving into micromanaging which trees in the tree protection plan are more important to us than others. So I think this is one of those ones where we're getting into the weeds, and I think that we should be approving the staff recommendation as it was written, not amended. So if the amendment fails, then I will move the original staff recommendation.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding this motion as amended? Councillor Frank.
Through the chair to staff, I'm just wondering, I don't actually notice a tree preservation report in this report, and maybe I'm missing it. I'm just used to seeing it like as a separate item. Like I see ecology, I see engineering, and I'm used to seeing like arborist report or like tree preservation report, and I can't find it. I do notice there are comments regarding tree preservation, but I'm just wondering if like that's missing or if I'm just not seeing it.
Staff.
Through the chair, the tree preservation plan is on the city website, posted with the application.
Councillor.
So just for clarification, it's not in this report?
Through the chair, we don't generally amend or attach reports with our reports as an appendix or anything. Comments come in from ecology will be attached, but generally not the entire submission material. That's just for the website.
Councillor.
Through the chair, again, this is on my second PEC meeting, but I'm thinking like, for example, at the last PEC meeting, we had a bunch of like sections, like underneath of ecology, there's another section that usually says like arborist report. And I remember like the Skyline application had it, the Southdale application had it in the last one. So I'm just wondering about the consistency, because I do like to read the tree preservation reports, and I just didn't know if it's going to be in this report or if it's going to be on the website. Like maybe if there's, I don't know, this is a general comment, but it'd be nice if it was either maybe in like this report, or if it's never going to be in this report, then I know to go on the website. So I don't know, that's more of a comment, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I'd just like to speak to my amendment, if there's no one else at committee, just to sort of have the last word here, and hoping I can get committee's support on this amendment, which is really to review the tree, the locust tree that stands on the property. I appreciate that staff have done their due diligence, and I appreciate the work that the applicant has done. When the applicant does speak to the tree preservation plan, the applicant speaks to the enhanced green buffering zone along the property boundary and the retention of existing trees. And even in the recommendation, it does say that the applicant is to retain as many mature trees as possible. I think it is fair to say, and given the importance of this development in the community and the retention of trees is important. There are a number of mature trees, and to emphasize the importance of that, as we approve this recommendation, I'm hoping the committee will support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? I'd ask Vice Chair Lewis to take the chair. I'd like to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one person on the speakers list, and that would be Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. What struck me about this application is the work that the applicant did with the neighborhood. And it was a tricky application. I mean, it involves a heritage building. I really respect the collaboration that the applicant did with the neighborhood and with the neighbors involved. So I think, as was mentioned by the committee earlier, you know, this is to throw one more sticking point in. I'm sure just by the nature of this, that if that had been possible to save this particular tree, it would have been done, and I think that was confirmed. But from what we heard from staff, I am cognizant of the workload of staff right now in handling applications. And my understanding from this motion would be that they would review it again, and if no change, it would go ahead. And I just personally think that would be redundant. So I won't be supporting the motion as amended, and we'll see what happens after the vote. Those are my comments, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I do not have a view of Zoom, so I'm not sure if the clerk has any visiting councillors with their hands up, but I have no one else on the speakers list here in chambers, so I'll return the chair to you.
Thank you. If there's no other comments or questions, we have a motion on the floor with an amendment to the staff recommendation, and I will call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion fails 2-3.
Thank you. I'll open the floor again to the committee. Councillor Lewis.
I will move the original staff recommendation.
And seconder, Councillor Hillier. Any other questions or comments regarding this motion? Councillor Frank.
I just wanted to reiterate most of the comments that have already been said, but I also think that this was a great application, and I was really impressed with the fact sheet that was put together by Civic, the consultant, just because it's very clear and easy to understand. As somebody without a planning background, I found it very comprehensive, and outlining the community engagement and then how the applicant responded to it was really helpful. So I just wanted to say kudos to both Royal Homes and Civic as well.
Any other comments or questions before I call the vote? I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Now we are moving on to, where are we at? No. Thank you. We are moving on to 3.3. 867, 875, and 879 Wellington Road. I will look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
We have the report from staff and their recommendation. I'll go to committee now if there are any technical questions for staff. Seeing none, I will go to the public. Is there anyone that would like to speak to the committee regarding this particular application? I see none in the gallery. I'll ask clerk if there is anybody online.
Scott Allen, the applicant, is here.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes. On behalf of the
Thank you.
applicant, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Scott Allen, and with MHBC Planning, we're acting on behalf of the applicant. At this time, we just want to simply express our support for the findings and recommendations of the planning staff report for this application. We'd also like to thank staff for their attention to this proposal and for expeditiously processing the application. Thank you for your consideration. We'll gladly answer any questions committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no other speakers that I see in the gallery nor online, so I'll look for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Hillier, and we'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I see Councillor Pelosa has joined us. I will go to committee first to see if there's any questions or comments, and if I see none, I'll go to Councillor Pelosa and then back to committee for further discussion. Councillor Pelosa, the floor is yours.
Thank you for letting me speak at your committee. As the word councillor in this application is within it, supportive of staff's recommendation as it falls into the correct uses that are already in this area, and recognizing this is also going to be part of the bus rapid transit corridor as well. So happy to see people coming early. My question through you to staff is, recognizing that one of the retailers have already reached out to staff behind the scenes, and there's a notice of passing and then an appeal period. Is it correct that none of these notice of passings or appeal period can start until after this has been approved at council on January 24th?
I'll go to staff on that.
Through the chair, as per the Planning Act, that is correct. So we need a decision from council, the notice to be sent out, and the appeal period is 20 days from that notice being sent out.
Okay, thank you. A follow-up through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. How quickly after council approves this on the 24th would those notices go out and that time period start for the applicant?
Staff?
Through the chair, that's a function of clerks. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but they're generally within the week, within 7 days to get it out.
Councillor?
Is there anyone from clerks who could speak to that at this time?
I will go to the clerk to speak to that timing.
Through the chair, I apologize, that's not my responsibility, but I do know it is usually within, they have up to 15 days, and I believe they try to get it out within the week.
Councillor?
Okay, doesn't seem to be a specific reply available this evening, but that concludes my questions. But Ms. Westlake Powers does have her hand up as well. Maybe she could be of assistance.
I will go to Ms. Westlake Powers.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would suggest that, as Ms. Lazinski has indicated, they will be circulated within the legislated timeline, but I would be unable to give you an exact timeline because that will depend on what else is happening and what other notices are required. But it will definitely be within the legislated circulation timeline.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that concludes my questions. I'm in support of the application.
Thank you. I'll go to committee for questions, comments, or motions. Councillor Hopkins.
No questions. Happy to put the motion forward.
Can I get a seconder? Councillor Hillier. Any questions or comments on the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
We're now on to 3.4, 600 3rd Street. Look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Lewis, a second. Councillor Hopkins. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
We have the staff report. Any technical questions for staff at this time from the committee? Seeing none, I will go to the applicant. If they're here to speak to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Scott Allen, MHBC Planning, acting on behalf of the applicant. We'd like to express our support for the recommendations set out in the planning staff report for this application. We also wanted to agree with the findings set out in the report that establishing a self-storage use within the existing building arrangement would help to optimize existing building space at this location and in a manner that's compatible with the surrounding development context and in keeping with applicable planning policies. So thank you for your consideration, and we'll gladly answer questions committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Now I'll go to the public. If there's anybody here in the gallery who would like to speak to this, that was your chance. Ask the clerk, is there anybody online?
Through the chair, there's no one on Zoom.
Okay. Seeing no one indicating they would like to speak to this, we'll look to the committee to close public participation meeting. Councillor Lewis, second. Councillor Hillier, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I'll open the floor to committee members for questions, comments, or motions. Councillor Hillier?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
We have a mover. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Lewis? Questions or comments on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We are now at 3.5, 1350 Trafalgar Street. I'll look to committee to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Hillier. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We have the staff report and recommendation before us. Are there any technical questions for staff at this moment from committee? Seeing none, I will go to the applicant for your chance. Thank you. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead. Could you turn on your mic? I don't think it's... Can you raise it up?
How about now?
There you go.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry, it's been a while since, the rock band thing. Thanks to the committee, and thank you very much to staff for processing this application. This is a bit of a unique one in that this property is kind of outlived its life as a general industrial property. There's been already some conversion of this property to self-storage, and the current owner of Forest City Storage is looking to legalize that and really change this property from a former industrial property to a commercial property. You'll see in the staff report that it does recommend approval with some site-specific regulations, and we're certainly in favor of the committee approving that. We have looked at the report and happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. I'll now open up the floor to any comments or questions, et cetera, from the public that wish to speak to this item. I don't see anyone in the gallery. Clerk, is there any online?
Through the chair, there's no one on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the committee for motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Lewis. I will call the vote.
Yeah, I've
I'll ask anyone who's online, please mute yourself. We can hear you in chambers.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. To committee, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to support the motion. Utilizing any existing building and not having it sit around empty is something that I support. So thank you to staff and the applicant for making this happen.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hillier. Any other questions or comments before I call the vote? Councillor Hillier.
The only sad thing about this is I think we might lose Yardigans, which is an amazing store in that property.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Then I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We are now down to 3.6. We have Mr. Levin, Chair of the Ecological and Community Advisory Committee with us to present the fourth and first reports of that committee. Mr. Levin, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Chair, I wanted to introduce PEC and members of council to the Ecological Community Advisory Committee, as well as to invite you to attend our meetings. Currently, we're meeting online, third Thursday of every month at 4:30. I want to return to that matter briefly. Just to let you know, ECAC is a technical advisory committee, and we stand ready to be given direction by this committee and council as to matters related to our mandate, and hopes the council will support any initiatives coming from the committee through PEC to council. Because it's a technical advisory committee, I've been very active in recruiting faculty and students from Western University. And from that result, it's a very diverse committee. It really doesn't even need a diversity lens. It automatically becomes diverse. And even last term, we had Mr. Wallace as a member of the committee. And actually a very important member of the committee because he asked really good questions. And I think it was helpful for his involvement to be there. If you're interested, I can tell you that we have on a number of measures, both people of color, women, most of our PhDs happen to be women. We have scientists in plant science. We have 2 hydrologists or people with water engineering experience, which has been very important because many of the applications we review are next to environmental features that are wetlands or watercourses. We also have a land use planner and 2 master's candidates, one in aquatic biology and another in plant sciences. And I speak to that because I have a vacancy now on the committee, and you'll see in our item 6, the 4th report, I'm asking the committee to support the application that is already on file for Dr. Marindi Eric Dusenji, a previous member of a predecessor committee. He's a postdoctorate fellow in plant sciences, and he's been attending our meetings, observing our meetings anyway. So I'd like you as a committee to support having SPPC to support that application so we can get somebody there right away. Finally, I'd like to point out that your advisory committee has been meeting since the middle of 2022, all online. And try to imagine if the new council had only been meeting online since its installation in November. You wouldn't have the same feel, you wouldn't have the same camaraderie. So asking your committee to initiate, not only for ECAC, but perhaps for all the other advisory committees, if not a hybrid meeting opportunity, maybe every quarter at least meeting in person. We as an ECAC have yet to meet in person. And frankly, I heard the chair earlier in the meeting say it's really good to be in person again. We would actually like to be in person for the first time after all this time. So if PEC could at least initiate that and ask staff to make sure that that happens by the beginning of the second quarter of this year, it would be much appreciated, and I think it would improve the effectiveness of your advisory committee and other advisory committees. I thank you for your time, Mr. Chair, and happy to answer any questions from committee and other members of council.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Appreciate that. Any comments or questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just very briefly, in follow-up to Mr. Levin's comments, I reviewed the application for the individual that they're recommending. I'm satisfied that the applicant would be an excellent addition to the committee because, as he indicated, it is on file, so it was possible to go back and look at that. And I think this is a very qualified individual who would fill the vacancy quite well. So I'll be supportive of that. I will say through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Levin, I think it's inappropriate for standing committees to start trying to direct other standing committees to take some actions. But I will take this opportunity to offer personally, and not just as a member of this committee, but in my role as deputy mayor, to bring a motion forward to SPPC for the next cycle to address the need for in-person meetings, because I frankly agree with Mr. Levin about the importance of those. I can't imagine having come into a new council and not having the opportunity to have sat down with Councillor Frank or other new members of council in person. And I think it's important that our advisory committees are given that opportunity as well. So I will extend my personal commitment to bring forward a motion to address that, Mr. Levin.
Thank you, Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. And in quick consultation with the clerk, you're absolutely right. That's a matter for SPPC. But I think Mr. Levin makes some really good points. Any other comments or questions from a committee? Councillor Frank.
My question, I think, is for staff, based on the committee reports. Is that okay to ask him?
That's okay.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
On the report dated December 15th, 2022, it looks like one of the working groups requested that the Forestry Department investigate a property at 260 Dundas Street regarding a road through an ESA. And I just was wondering, one, if those kinds of requests from committee, do they just like automatically happen, or through approval of these minutes, would our approval of these minutes and their request then trigger staff to go out and do that assessment?
I'll go to staff on that.
Through the chair, I can't speak to the kind of the process of approving the advisory committees and where those recommendations or regulations go forward through, but I think in order to have it maybe more transparent, if you're looking for that as a specific direction, you could make that resolution.
Councillor.
Through the chair, then yes, I would like to request the Forestry Department do that investigation if possible.
So that you're making a motion?
I think I am. I'm requesting that the request in the report. That we support the request in the, so.
Okay, we have a motion. Can I have a seconder on that? Councillor Hopkins. Comments on the motion on the floor. Councillor Lewis.
So this one perplexes me because I'm aware that there's an active application in the pre-consultation phase for this property. So an environmental impact study would be required for a successful application to come forward anyway. So I'm a little confused as to, and perhaps through you, Chair, our delegate might be able to offer some insight as well, because when I was reading through this report, I did note this as well. And I checked both the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority and the City of London's website, neither of which, through their mapping, indicate that this property is actually an ESA. I did seem to find some indication that it might be an area that the Upper Thames might want to consider some further ecological evaluation on, but not that there was a formal ESA designation on this property. And through you to our staff, as part of an active application, would an assessment of what I believe we have there is an unopened municipal road allowance. Would that not be assessed as part of the application process if the property owner at 2060 was to submit an application?
I'll go to staff on that.
So yes, we would have our ecologist staff reviewing any application that might come in and any features that might be on there as part of an application if we were to receive one.
Councillor.
Okay, that's helpful to know, because from what I see on the geomapping on the city's website is that the road is actually an unopened municipal road allowance adjacent to 2060 Dundas, which is the Church of the Ascension property. So it's not that a private road has been opened there, it's that we have an unopened municipal road allowance. Now, having done a site visit, there's not actually a road there. There's a corridor where there's not vegetation, but it's not actually a traversable road. No change to the soil has been made or anything. So I appreciate EPAC's concern here. And as they indicated, this was raised as part of an application being in pre-consult phase. So I'm just looking perhaps for some staff clarification or from our delegate in terms of whether or not we even need another motion or whether this is just part of the process moving forward.
Councillor, I'm going to go up to Mr. Levin to provide some insight from the advisory committee's perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question that was raised at your advisory committee is not related to the work on 2060 Dundas Street East. It's the adjacent property to the east. It's certainly not designated as an ESA. It's potentially part of a larger woodland. It is in their tree preservation area. So your advisory committee raised it at the advisory committee meeting because when it looked at the air photos, it noticed the intrusion into the woodland on the adjacent property. And because it's a tree preservation area, that's under the ambit of the forestry department, and that's why the committee saw fit to put that element in its minutes. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. I see Ms. Westlake Power has her hand up. I'm going to go to the clerk right now.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to offer some additional information for the committee's consideration with respect to how these recommendations work through the committee and council process. So the recommendation that you see before you in Part B of 4.2, which is on page 236 of the main agenda, and that's related to the forestry department be requested to investigate the property to the east of 2060 Dundas Street, as there is a storage facility and a road through an environmentally significant area. Should this report be accepted by the Planning and Environment Committee, that recommendation would move forward for action to council. And if approved at council, then staff would receive the corresponding resolution letter, and it would be incumbent upon staff to undertake this work. So a separate motion to that effect is not required.
Thank you for that guidance. I will go to Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was going to say, if committee does receive and approve this report, this would automatically be going forward. And again, at council. So my question for you, Mr. Chair, to staff is that a concern?
To staff.
Through the chair, that is not a concern, that it would be going directly to forestry staff. I will note that through any planning application, planning and development staff and will circulate forestry on that as well.
So, Mr. Chair, just to follow up with those comments from staff, we really don't need a motion. Happy to withdraw the motion, and I will be supporting this going forward. Thank you.
I will go to the mover of the motion, Councillor Frank, to withdraw the motion.
Yes, happy to withdraw.
Okay, so the motion has been withdrawn, and we have a new motion on the floor from Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Is there any discussion? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just coming back to the some detail we got from our delegate, Mr. Levin. I'm not concerned about forestry or planning investigating this situation. It'd be part of their due diligence anyway. But my concern now is that the minutes from the advisory committee reflect a road through an environmentally significant area. And our delegate just indicated that that's not actually accurate because it's not an environmentally significant area. So I'm a little concerned that we've got some minutes from the advisory committee that are in question, and how we treat whether it's a significant woodlot or a wetland feature or some other natural feature is somewhat different than how we might treat something that's already designated as an ESA. So I'm a little bit concerned about the inaccuracy of what's reflected in the minutes here. So I'm not sure how to proceed. I mean, I don't think that we can be amending minutes from an advisory committee. They're not our minutes. So I'm a little bit at a stalemate as to how we might proceed in receiving this, noting at the same time that the specific reference to an environmentally significant area in section D, part 2, is a matter up for question.
I've been informed by the clerk that we could change 4.2B to clarify your concerns, Councillor.
Okay, so through you then, Mr. Chair, I think that D part 2, maybe rather than through an environmentally significant area, we might just change that to read a road through an area of environmental concern. And maybe if you'll allow, if we can seek some, perhaps a nod of agreement or disagreement from our delegate, who is the chair of that committee, in terms of whether that would capture their intent.
Mr. Levin?
Thank you. Through the chair, I would suggest if you strike environmentally significant area, and I apologize for missing this in my review of the minutes, and replace it with a tree preservation area, that would, I believe, help.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Councillor Lewis?
Then I would be very satisfied to change that through a tree preservation area.
Okay, so we're making a slight amendment to the motion that was, I think, moved by Councillor Hopkins, I believe. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. And obviously the seconder is. So any comments or questions from the committee on that? I will go to staff for their comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just if we're looking to clarify the wording, it is also an unopened right-of-way, not a road, if we wanted to make that change as well.
I'm going to have the clerk read out the wording on this to make sure it's okay with committee staff and Mr. Levin as well. Get your thoughts on that. I think we're getting there. Go ahead, clerk.
So Part D relates to the property located at 2060 Dundas Street. II, the Forestry Department be requested to investigate the property to the east of 2060 Dundas Street, as there is a storage facility and an unopened right-of-way through a tree preservation area.
I will go to staff first. Is that, Mr. O'Hagan, is that what you, does that satisfy your concerns?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think that should be sufficient for staff to have direction at what to investigate.
Okay, Mr. Levin, are you?
I agree.
I see good nodding up there. I see good nodding from committee members here. So I think we're all on the same page. So just wait a second here for Councillor Hillier to return. Just if it indulges the committee, or I'll go to Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. In the meantime, I just want to thank Mr. Levin for attending the PEC meeting here. It's very helpful when we have chairs from advisory groups come in and give further explanations and invite us to meetings. I also look forward, Deputy Mayor Lewis, I do appreciate you bringing the request forward at SPPC on looking at how advisory groups can meet. I've not only heard it here tonight, but I've heard it through other members of advisory groups, the need to at least touch base once in a while in person. So look forward to that coming forward at SPPC too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And my comments, Mr. Levin, thank you for coming today. And yeah, an email of when you think advisory committee meeting would be, of certain interest. I for sure wouldn't mind seeing that come out just as a reminder to, drop in and hear the wisdom of certain very learned committee members for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will endeavor to do that.
Thank you.
For members of council.
So seeing no other further questions or comments, we have a motion and second, and I will put that on the floor for a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on, 3.7 regarding 942 Westminster Drive. I'll look for committee motion to open the PPM. Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Frank. I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We have the staff report recommendation. I'll open the floor for any technical questions for staff at this time. Seeing none, I would normally go to the applicant. I'm informed that the applicant is not present. I will go to members of the public if they would like to speak to this. The gallery here at Chambers is no other people that look like want to speak to this. Any online?
Through the chair, there's no one on Zoom.
Thank you. We have no one Zoom, no one looking to speak to this, including the applicant. And then I will look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Hopkins, second by Councillor Hillier. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I'll open the floor to committee members for comments, questions, motions. Councillor Hillier.
I will move the staff recommendation.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Frank. Any comments or questions? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, just a quick question for you to chair to staff, just for the public's sake. just in case someone is listening in on this recommendation, that what we are doing here tonight is really just recognizing the existing dwelling. We are not approving any other development. Just want confirmation.
So go to staff.
Through the chair, I can confirm no new development will resolve this. We're recognizing the new lot area created by a consent application.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion moved and seconded. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We are we heard before 5:30 and it's 5:34, so we are okay. This is regarding 400 Southdale Road East. I will look to committee for motion to open the PPM. Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Lewis. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I understand staff have a brief presentation to make on this item, so I will go to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Meg Sundercock. I'm a site development planner with the City of London. This is my file. I do have a presentation. It's with the report. I do want to give a short sort of preamble though before we get into the application. Since we don't tend to see public site plan meetings too often at Planning and Environment Committee, especially kind of in comparison to how often we see zoning bylaw amendments, that this is a little bit of a different process for any sort of new members of the committee or those that are sort of unfamiliar or need a little bit of a refresher on how we handle public site plan meetings. The purpose of this application tonight is for the public to have additional input on the site design matters related to this application and for the committee to report any issues raised with the site plan approval authority, which has been delegated to staff. So what's before you isn't an application for approval or refusal. It's just an additional opportunity for input as part of the site plan process as required by the H5 holding provision that was applied during the rezoning for this application. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sundercock. Any technical questions for staff at this point? Seeing none, I'll open the gallery for any comments on Mr. Wallace. I don't see you rushing up to the mic, so I will assume not. I don't see anyone else here. Any people joining us online, clerk?
Yes, Carmen, please.
Carmen, please go ahead. Please state your full name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is actually John Arians. I'm a planning consultant. Carmen works with me at IBI Group. We are here on behalf of LJM Developments. As staff pointed out, this is kind of an unusual process in that it's a site plan application rather than a zoning. The zoning did raise a number of public concerns, and through the guidance of Councillor Pelosa, it was decided that the site plan would actually return before a public information meeting such as tonight. I'm here primarily to answer any questions. What is before you is a very nice infill project, 179 units in a 4, 6, and 7-story step-back building with enhanced landscaping and a really attractive design. So it's a transit supportive development that provides substantial car parking, bike parking, and has a very high walking score with commercial, institutional, and employment uses in the immediate surrounding area. So we're very pleased to have the site plan before you. We've actually had 2 open house meetings during the zoning process, and I'm here to answer any questions that may come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arians. Any other people that would like to speak to this online? Clerk, do you see any others?
Through the chair, the people here are all with the applicant.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing nobody else, I will look to committee for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Hopkins, second by Councillor Lewis. I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I'll open the floor to committee. Any questions for the applicant or staff on this? This is just reporting on feedback from the public. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And since this is about feedback from the public, I guess I would like to ask a question. I'm very supportive of this development. It's great to see how it supports the London plan, and it more or less fits in within the character of the community. The question is around affordable housing and how we do affordable housing. And there was a question that has been asked from the public around how we do that. And I understand in this recommendation, HDC will be taking on the 4 units that we are approving for affordable housing. And I wonder if staff could just speak to how and what opportunities, what this opportunity looks like in the city taking on these units, but also what tools are there available to us now that this probably was a result of bonusing, but now as we go forward, having opportunities for affordable units, what are we left with, and what do we need to do as a council going forward with these new changes? But my first question is really around these 4 units and how HDC will be taking on the responsibility.
To staff.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. This is a very unique circumstance. Admittedly, PEC and Council previously have seen bonus applications where there have been a certain percentage of units with a certain percentage of affordable market rate. Depending on the circumstance and the lift required, it could be anywhere from 80 to 90% or for a certain duration. In most, if not all of those cases, those would have all been rental type of developments. In this case, from what I gather through the rezoning process, which subsequently resulted in a bonus zone, this is intended to be condoized and conveyed to individual unit holders. It would ultimately result in the ownership through a condo corporation. So that was the strategy employed through this zoning application, where the 4 units, because there would be no tenant or landlord like a developer, like the other cases, the city saw an opportunity to obtain the units through conveyance to the city through municipal housing. And that's how the bonus zone was written. So this is, I believe, the first and maybe the only situation through all the bonus zones that we have where there will be 4 units that will be dedicated to the city through the process. Obviously, that will come with some costs, like any other condo owner or condo unit owner would have. But definitely a unique opportunity for the city to explore in terms of tools within the toolbox for affordable housing. In terms of how the process works, so we'll obviously take any comments we hear tonight. Doesn't sound like there's too many from the public. Obviously, there was a few that came in through the mail, which is we'll try to work through. And once site plan approval is completed, we will prepare a development agreement as is normal, but also a bonus agreement, which will obligate the owner to dedicate those 4 units to municipal housing, to the city. And through the condo process, it will eventually create the ownership of those units, which would then form the dedication to the city. And then our folks can do what they need to with them at that point. So certainly a unique opportunity, and one we're excited to explore a little bit more. And we're quite close to the end here of this application to get that next step realized once construction is complete. In terms of kind of future tools, I may pass it over to Ms. O'Hagan to speak very broadly, maybe to some of the interim IZ provisions that we maybe had looking forward to.
Yes, through the chair. So very high level, we will be shifting away from bonusing as a tool to secure some of these units. As I'm sure you're aware of, the roadmap to 3,000 affordable units does outline some other tools and opportunities that we can look forward to, and partnering with the not-for-profit and the for-profit development industry to try and secure some of these units within kind of mixed tenure buildings going forward. In addition to that, looking at inclusionary zoning as an opportunity to get some of the units into more mixed ownership buildings as well.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you through the chair to staff. Really appreciate the answers to some of the questions around affordable housing, and it's good to see that we do have some tools that you no longer will be allowed, but looking at other opportunities. So really we'll be supporting the application going forward. It's a great development, and it's good to know that we have 4 one-bedroom affordable housing units in there. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor Pelosa is with us. Before I go to Councillor, I'll just check with committee members if there's any further questions that they might have. Councillor Frank.
I just want to share, I thought that this was also a great application. I'm excited to support it. Couple things, I really love seeing more bike parking spaces than car parking spaces. Very exciting. And then also the amount of landscaped areas, so the trees, the perennial plants and the shrubs. I did have one question, and I don't know if it is within site plan authority, but is there a possibility to stipulate or encourage or require that some of those species, if not all, be native species, or where possible?
Staff.
Thank you through the chair. It's a comment we use very often in our site plan comments. I can't speak to the actual percentage of native species in this mix, but it is definitely a comment that is made at first submission and very often repeated through second and third submission. So I can't give you the exact number at this point. If Ms. Lundercock has any indication at this point, she may be able to jump in, but it's definitely a comment that we do make.
Councillor.
That's good, thank you.
Good, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you for recognizing me again at your committee. This application is also within Ward 12, and I'm asking for your support of it tonight. The applicant has been very responsive to the community and the requests as it's come through in regards to planting, setbacks, garbage collection, the commercial that was originally on the property that will no longer be, recognizing that this is highly a walkable community, and there was resident concerns regarding traffic, parking, and noise, construction. So in realizing at the time South London hadn't seen a lot of applications, just thank you to staff and the committee and the applicant for taking their time with the community to bring this forward. Absolutely raising the bar in regards to affordable housing in the city, that it's just not the city having use of the units for X amount of years, that they're actually gifted to the city, all 4 units. So that's going to make a long-term impact to help plan for Londoners who need those. So thank you again for your time tonight and asking for your support.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? If the committee would indulge me, I'll just have one. When we have had bonusing with affordable units, a lot of times it was a percentage rent, 80% of common average market rent. I'm guessing that the city would be undertaking whatever, they would be owners of the units, and so thus could dictate whether it be that type of rental agreement or rent geared to income. Is that something that has yet to come, that determination, because this is all new roads that we're traveling right now?
At a very high level, I would agree with that comment through you, to Mr. Chair. I don't know the exact number, and I don't believe it was stipulated in the bonus zone, so I would let our folks who would take ownership of that probably deal with that rate accordingly.
Okay, thank you. The clerk has drawn up drafting a motion that we can perhaps share if someone want to move it, as this is passing on feedback to our planning department. Clerk, if you could read that out, please.
That on the recommendation of the acting director of planning and development, the following actions be taken with respect to the application of LJM Developments relating to the property located at 400 Southdale Road East. Part A, the approval authority be advised that no issues were raised at the public meeting with respect to the application for site plan approval to facilitate the construction of the proposed residential development. And Part B, the approval authority be advised that the municipal council supports the planning application.
I'm looking for a mover of that motion. Councillor Lewis, second by Councillor Hopkins. Any further questions, comments before I put that to the vote? Seeing none, I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. There are no items for direction. We do have deferred matters from our consent items, items 2.1, 2.2, and 2.5. So I will put 2.1 on the floor regarding 600 Sunningdale Road West. I'll look to committee for motions, comments, questions, etc. Councillor Lewis.
Well, I know that Councillor Frank pulled it. I don't know whether she had questions or amendments or what she might want to put forward. I'm happy to move the staff recommendation and then see where she wants to take the discussion from there.
We have a mover, Councillor Lewis. We have a seconder, Councillor Hillier. I see Councillor Rahman has joined us on Zoom as well. I'll go to committee first for any questions or comments regarding the motion. Councillor Frank.
I think I have a bunch of technical questions. So can I do?
Yep.
Yeah, go for it. Okay. One of my questions is, my understanding of the Lennon Plan and the city design policies is we are trying to move towards grid formations for new subdivisions. And I'm just trying to understand, this is like kind of a grid, but not really. And I'm wondering if that was given some consideration by staff and the developer, and how come it's not more gritty, I guess.
We'll go to staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Bruce Page, manager for subdivision. This application came in 2018, and we were dealing with the applicant there. There was some natural heritage issues, topography issues, and the street alignment is something that was derived at between the applicant, our transportation department, and the planning department. There was an attempt to try to make a grid formation, and this was sort of the best that we could yield.
Councillor.
Thank you. Next question. I'm just wondering, again, in the report, it mentioned that there's not going to be any land set aside for a school block, and I was wondering how that deliberation was made and if that could just be explained a bit.
I'll go to staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The application, as I mentioned, came in 2018. In April 2018, we did our standard circulation, which included the school boards, all 4 school boards. They were notified. They did not provide any requests for lands in this area. Looking at this plot of land, it probably isn't an ideal location for a school. It is somewhat isolated. It's surrounded by Sunningdale Road to the north and the Medway, both to the, or basically on all 3 sides, the east, the west, and the south. So it would pretty much require that students be bused, and would remove the opportunity for students walking to school. But again, the request was put out to all the school boards, all 4 of them, and none of them had made application for us to reserve some of the blocks.
Councillor.
Thank you. Another question I had was, why are we accepting less parkland than we should according to our policies? So I just see outlined that it is suggested that in the future, the 0.206 hectares of parkland that's missing from this area to meet the minimum might be developed in other areas, but I guess what's the certainty? Like, what if those areas don't get developed and we don't get cash in lieu and we don't get the right amount of parkland? I'm wondering what certainty we have. Is there like a contract where it can guarantee we'll get that 0.206 hectares?
Mr. Page.
Through Mr. Chair, the parkland dedication there, as part of this application, we acquired a significant portion of the Medway Forest, the lands again to the east, south, and west. So we acquired those as part of parkland dedication. There was also a portion of that was a multi-use pathway that comes down from the bottom of Street A. Sorry, I forget the name of the street, but Street A that comes in straight from Sunningdale. There's a pathway connection that leads from there into the Medway Heritage Valley. The balance of the parkland is going to be applied to lands north of the site that's part of the Sunningdale Holdings, and that will be used to acquire additional parkland up there. If those lands aren't acquired, then cash in lieu would be required and the applicant would repay it. It's included within the subdivision agreement, so it is tracked that way. Parkland dedication, as it was required back in 2018, still required today under the current bill, and we would be taking that. Typically, cash in lieu is taken at the time of building permit. So when the properties come in to get their building permit, there's a fee that's applied at that, and that was the former CP9, which I believe has been changed now to CP25.
Councillor.
Thank you. I'm almost done. Through the chair, another thing I noticed in this application is that it says we're only going to do sidewalks on one side and not both. And again, I thought in the London plan, we're supposed to be doing on both sides in any new subdivision. And I know at Civic Works, there was a report about having to do neighborhood connectivity plans for retrofitting areas where there aren't any sidewalks. And I just noticed it was referenced in there as well that any new subdivision is going to be having 2 sidewalks. So I just was wondering why we don't have that in this site, this area.
Mr. Page.
Through Mr. Chair, the sidewalk issue was discussed with the applicant. It was approved as part of the 2018 plan of subdivision. The applicant has come forward and they're looking at, this is for subdivision agreement, and the subdivision agreement, would there be registering it? So the applicant was looking at registering these lands. There'll be a subsequent application that'll be coming forward that will probably extend the draft approval. And at that time, we would be looking to have the discussion about 2-sided sidewalks. But at this point in time, the application that's before the committee is for special provisions to be included within the subdivision agreement. So it would be those discussions that were held prior to the 2-sided sidewalk. Again, the committee will probably receive a report either next committee meeting or the following one, which will be asking for an extension of draft approval, and that extension will discuss the 2-sided sidewalks.
Councillor.
Thank you. Those are all my questions, and I do look forward to that because I do think I'd hate to have to put in one sidewalk in this and then in 5 years go back and try and put another one in for this neighborhood connectivity plan. So I look forward to the opportunity to comment on having sidewalks on both sides. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members before I go to Councillor Rahman? Councillor Hopkins, sorry, I apologize. I did have you on the list.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank Councillor Frank for her questions. I've been able to tick off a few of my questions on this consent item. I would like just to make a comment around the schools though, and I think it's really important. I hope the Board of Education is following our recommendations that we approve here. And when I see in agreements that there is a lack of school in the area, it is concerning. It seems like our social infrastructure really lags behind, as well as our infrastructure itself. When we approve these developments, how they catch up is something that I have a concern. My question for you to staff, and I had pulled 2.2 as well, and the question I had was both on 2.1 and 2.2. It is around the financial securities, and I think it's really important with the changes that we've had in Bill 23 as we approve these consent items that we really have an understanding the financial financial implications, especially around the DCs and how they're going to work. And I understand DCs really start when we have, when it goes through the building division stage, and we're not there right now, but we will be there. It has to go there to get the permit. But I have a question through you to staff. I understand staff will be here to answer the question around how and if and will there be money for this through our DCs? And if we do not have money, where will this money come from as we are approving these subdivisions and the need for building, and that has to continue. But I would like to know where we are on who's paying for this.
I'll go to staff on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Mr. Yeoman from Capital Assets and Projects. Happy to provide a response to that and welcome the question. So we're anticipating that the 2 phases of this subdivision will yield out approximately, well, actually over $3 million in DC revenues that go to pay for all the infrastructure costs that have been invested in the area over a number of years. To the councillor's question related to Bill 23 impact, what I can confirm for the committee is that even though Bill 23 is in force and effect, the provisions for the DC phase-in does not come into play until a new background study and bylaw is completed and approved by council. We're anticipating that will be at least 2025, if not longer than that as well. So the DCs, given that there's a lot of demand for housing in this area, we anticipate the DCs will be paid before that time period. So we're not anticipating the need to subsidize at this point. Bill 23, however, does have provisions that are in force and effect related to units that are deemed to be attainable, and we are still receiving and waiting to receive direction from the province about what that does mean. However, I anticipate, given the lot size and the intended market for these single-family units, that they probably won't be hitting the provisions of the attainable housing that will require subsidization in the future. We're going to look forward to providing council with a fulsome report on the Bill 23 impacts in the coming months.
Councillor?
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. I think it is a concern every time we approve these or bring forward these consent items that we really understand the implications behind them. Appreciate staff's comments and look forward to receiving further reports on the consequences, I guess, or exactly where we're going when we approve these attainable or not, and how it all fits through the process. So really appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Rahman now.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you for having me at committee. As you may know, this is in Ward 7, and I'm happy to speak to a couple of the concerns that were raised around the school zoning and the lack of schools included in the application. I did meet with both with 2 of the 4 school boards, Thames Valley and with London Catholic District School Board trustees, to find out a bit more about this particular application and the impacts on schools. I do believe London Catholic especially addressed it in the report as well, that this would be in a holding zone as their schools are full and they're awaiting a new build in the area. Thames Valley is actually in a public input process related to this particular development, Sunningdale Court, that is closing at the end of this month, January 31st, and they will make a decision whether or not students that would be living in this area would be moved to Jack Chambers Public School. So that is currently in process, and they are seeking public input on that matter. So based on that, the ability for both Thames Valley to have a solution that could be provided through a holding zone and London Catholic District School Board through a holding zone, I do feel like it is meeting the needs and of course, something we all have eyes on around overcapacity schools in the area. And for that reason, supportive of the application. Thank you to Councillor Frank for raising the issue around sidewalks. I too looked at it and had some concerns. I know that neighborhood has expressed concerns around those pathways that were park and lieu being closed to public and when those would be open. And I expect that they're closed due to the fact that there's ongoing construction in the site. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion that's been seconded, that's on the floor. If the committee will permit me, I'll just add a comment with Sir Arthur Currie and what we saw last spring, heightened awareness of the challenges of schools and their distribution being part of the process when we are making plans for subdivisions, et cetera, and the challenges that are really faced and can kind of put council in a box, quite frankly, like we felt last spring when those parameters aren't adequately addressed. So I thank the councilors for raising that and for checking with the school boards because that is not our jurisdiction. It's a school board prerogative to do their school distribution planning. However, it does cross into our area when it impacts development of land, and we just recently had that example. So I think it's on our radar for sure, and that's why there might be some heightened awareness when we see this, the staff report come to us that touches on that area. So I want to thank staff for those questions. Seeing no other comments or questions, we have 2.1 that's been, a motion's been made and seconded, and I will put that vote to the floor.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, and we now have 2.2, which is on the same property. So I will go to committee on that. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had pulled that to go along with 2.1, 2.2, answers, questions have been answered, and thank the committee for the conversation.
Are you moving that, Councillor? Staff referral or recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Lewis. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll put the vote to the floor.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, and we have a kind of a technical issue. As staff have requested a referral of 2.5. So I will look to committee to motion for that referral. Councillor Hopkins, I have a seconder. Councillor Hillier, any comments or questions? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, staff, for your time today, and committee members, and for councillors joining us that are not on the committee. As always, we appreciate your questions and concerns, and to the delegate council, to Mr. Levin, we appreciate his time. I'll look for a motion for adjournment. Councillor Hillier, second by Councillor Lewis. Hand vote.
That carries.
Perfect. Thank you, folks.